My hard drive here is like littered with thousands of half-finished pieces that are just some MIDI. I reopened a song that I began 10 years ago recently on Cubase, and amazingly I think that song's going to get finished now, which is lovely, but there are literally thousands of these little nuggets. Hi, this is Joe Goddard, sometimes of Hot Chip and various other projects. Honestly, I have very little idea of any kind of grand scheme for an album before I begin it. I have a lot of admiration for people that can formulate a kind of a concept or an idea for an album. And it's something that we speak about all the time with Hot Chip, to maybe do that, to limit ourselves in terms of our palette of instruments. We talked about going away to a studio in the countryside with just a Euro rack modular and a grand piano. We had this idea after we were in Philippe Zadar's studio in Paris, and we happened to be playing on a grand piano and a Euro rack, and thought this would be a lovely sound world for a new album. What's always happened is when we've come to actually make a record, we get carried away with using other instruments and find it hard to kind of formally limit ourselves to this palette. This room that I'm in right now, which is my home studio, I would sketch out chords and ideas for a song, get a tempo, maybe get some drum samples and write some MIDI, and then I would take all of that information into our wonderful, more fully kitted out studio in Shoreditch, where I have all of my synthesizers laid out and ready to go. Al Doyle from Hot Chip and LCD Sound System is there with me with all of his gear, and that's where I bring the music to life, send this MIDI out into this world of different synthesizers and begin to kind of play with that chordal information, sending MIDI out to like 3 or 4 keyboards and getting them all going and mess with them, and that helps me to kind of develop the sound world of each song. Sometimes I've been downstairs in my kitchen listening to the radio and I've heard an amazing record and I want to capture some of the emotion of that record. Mostly just the emotional kind of feel, like whether it's a melancholy house track or whatever, which I guess is kind of what I often end up doing. Try to kind of mimic the feel of the chords that have been used in a song, and I'll walk upstairs and sit at my kind of MIDI keyboard and try to recreate that. Other times I just have no idea and I see what happens with the chords. I will dick about to a certain extent, you know, I will write in lots of notes, sometimes even in a kind of haphazard way, and see what sticks. Try to surprise myself. I find that like after maybe an hour or so, I sometimes have an inkling of whether this chordal thing that I'm creating has an exciting vibe that I'm feeling proud of and good about, something that I feel energized to finish and share with people, or whether it's kind of going nowhere. And then I don't discard all of those things immediately. I just set them to one side and kind of maybe persevere with them in a couple of weeks' time, you know. There are different ideas of mixing across the album depending on like the space that I was imagining the song being heard in. There's definitely moments that are designed for headphones. And I love getting in the zone, you know, controlling that world of sound, of like little moments that appear in your left ear or whatever, and you know, and trying to find space for all of these sounds. That's a wonderful thing to get lost in. If there's a song that the inspiration was more, like I'm thinking of the song called Flow, which was the first single from the album, doesn't really have so much of these kind of headphone details within that song, because I guess in my imagination that song is more like a kind of communal dancing song. Some of my favourite moments in a club are when a DJ's been playing more instrumental tracks, and then there's like a vocal disco house song that kind of unites everybody in like a moment of energy and kind of joy. And so that song is, the way it's mixed is more for that moment, and you find in that kind of music that there's a simplicity because you want there to be a kind of clarity on a club sound system. Across my career, it's definitely been the case that like the feeling or the meaning of the album becomes more apparent towards the end of the process, and even at this point in the process when I begin speaking about it with people is when it starts to make more sense, like what I was actually doing. The new album is called Harmonics. The meaning of that is I wanted the ethos of the record to be about collaborating with a lot of people in a harmonious way, allowing everyone's contributions to be accepted and without judgment. It's a reference to a slightly hippie-ish concept of kind of feeling like the world needs a bit more kind of harmony and empathy right now, rather than there being so much aggression and antagonism. Naturally, the kind of music that I make is quite mellifluous, harmonious, gentle. So it just kind of seemed to fit the vibe of what I was trying to create. I never thought of it in a literal sense because I'm not super kind of musically trained, so I'm not really aware of like which kind of type of harmonies I'm prone to, but I definitely have kind of harmonies that come to my mind when I'm recording my vocals that I use like repeatedly. So there's probably a kind of mode or scale that I'm drawn to. The kind of flowing nature of the kind of synthesizers, sounds and melodies, that I wanted everything to work in this kind of harmonious kind of whole. This idea of kind of working intuitively and harmoniously with a bunch of people, that's been my kind of calling card for the last few years, because we've had this amazing new studio space in Shoreditch where we've been inviting a lot of different artists to come and collaborate. Through that process of working with lots of different people in that space, I've seen when music is finished in a really successful, beautiful way, and when music has really been derailed by ego and kind of someone wanting to control the process. We've had all of these different kind of psychological experiences in the studio, letting this thing build and grow in this kind of really hippie-ish, beautiful way. And I've seen those things be just torn apart by someone kind of wanting to be in charge, and the whole thing's psychologically falling apart. So I guess that's really where the idea came from with my record, of like trying to work in an intuitive, harmonious way where I'm not letting my conscious mind make all of the decisions about finishing the music, working unconsciously and without ego. I think it is the truest version of me, because when your ego gets involved is when you start to try to make decisions about the music based on whether you think it's going to be commercially successful, and you start thinking of your audience and trying to attract people to your music. Sometimes we have bands come into the studio and you need to say like, maybe this song needs to be a little bit shorter and maybe we should emphasize the chorus a little bit. And I guess in terms of my music, like not letting all of those things come to the forefront too much, like trying to listen without prejudice to the music and decide, like, I think that I love this, there's something human and something that I enjoy about this, whatever it is, and just let this music be this. So it is trying to get to like a purer version of your own favourite music. I've been thinking about this recently, actually. I've been seeing on Instagram over the last year, there are some clips of musicians that were involved in making like Bad by Michael Jackson. Those musicians kind of recreating the sounds that they used on like a Linn drum or a Oberheim drum machine, and then a Jupiter 8 for like some stabs, and an ARP 2600 to do the bass line. And I bought that tape when I was maybe 11 or 12 years old. It was one of the first tapes I bought with my own money, and I listened to on my Walkman. And I never considered myself to be an enormous fan of that record when I was 11, 12 years old, but my musical tastes changed rapidly after that into other things. But I've realised that I've actually collected a lot of those bits of gear in my studio now. Sonically, the way that those drum machines and synths interact and sound together, I think kind of went in as almost like a kind of blueprint of music in some way for me. These kind of processes that these musicians were talking about on making that record are things that I do all the time now. On My Mind, I was recording vocals for the song during the pandemic while my kids were in the same room at home and eating their lunch, eating spaghetti with their knives and forks at the kitchen table near me. And I considered these vocals to be kind of demo vocals. I ended up leaving those vocal tracks in the song because as I came to understand it over time, those artifacts are really, really pleasing to me, and I feel like they bring a quality to the song of being kind of slightly less, less perfectionist, maybe more human a little bit. All these terms about making music more human and alive are overused as well, but that was a thought that came into my mind. Would Lee Perry have like recorded some kind of noisy track of him like hitting bottles filled with water at the Black Ark? He wouldn't have minded if there was some unwanted noise in the background of those tracks, I don't think, so it all becomes part of the fabric of the song.
I'd like to thank my good friend and colleague Ashley Clivery for producing that beautiful episode, and also, of course, to Joe Goddard. This is season 2 of Sounds Good Right. We will return next week with another episode, and we've got loads more exciting stuff lined up for this series. Thank you for bearing with us. I know it's been a few months, but we are back, and it's good to be here.
Yo, T-Bone, did you produce this?
Sounds good, right?